Hey everybody, this is Mr. Mobbin coming at you again with another APUSH video. This is our third video focusing in on the topic 7.3, which is looking at the Spanish-American War and other U.S. foreign policy examples during the age of imperialism. Now last two videos, we actually looked at the causes and effects of the Spanish-American War. What we're going to do now is we're going to start to take a look at some other examples of the U.S.'s growing global influence aside from what's going to be happening, for the most part, from the effects of the Spanish-American War. And the first place we're going to start to take a look at is America's relationship with China. Now, we've already mentioned previously that the United States had some tensions with China dating back several years due to growing Chinese immigration into the United States, the passage of the Chinese Exclusion Act, and so there was already some animosity there. But the Chinese government really couldn't do much about it because, unlike today, the Chinese government was very, very weak. And how weak was it? Well, it was controlled by foreign powers engaging in spheres of influence. So if you take a look at this map right over here, you can see how China was carved up by the major powers of the time. France, Britain, Germany, Japan, even Russia to some degree. And remember, in a sphere of influence, that country that has a sphere of influence in a given location controls the entire economy of that region. So what happens is that, let's say, for example, in a French sphere of influence, it's going to be French-only goods that are going to be sold there. No local goods, no other foreign goods. The French are going to control that territory themselves economically and obviously make a whole heck of a lot of money. And the Chinese people are going to be exploited as customers. Now, this is going to, as you can imagine, lead to quite a bit of resentment amongst Chinese people. And this will basically culminate in what is going to be known as the Boxer Rebellion. So let's take a look at that real quick. Now, the Boxer Rebellion is going to be the response to the spheres of influence. And what's going to happen is that you're going to see a number of young Chinese men, around college age or so, begin to kind of rise up. And they're going to begin to start a movement to kick the foreigners out by force with bloodshed. And as you can imagine, the major powers that be did not like this. They did not want to have their economic strangleholds threatened by these native Chinese people. So you're going to see a coalition brought together of French and British and German and also American troops heading to China in 1900 to put down the rebellion, which they will. This is only going to add to, future resentment by the Chinese people towards the excesses of capitalism, the influences of foreigners. To some degree, it's not a surprise how, China in less than 50 years afterwards becomes a communist nation. But anyhow, in the meantime, as these foreign powers are holding on to their spheres of influence, John Hay, the Secretary of State at the time for both McKinley and then Theodore Roosevelt, is going to be concerned about, America not having, a slice of the pie, so to speak. You got all these different nations that are taking chunks of China. What about the United States? We didn't have our own sphere of influence. So what John Hay proposes is something that he believes is a fair, resolution to promote, fairness economically for the foreign powers in Europe. And this is going to be known as the open door policy. The basic gist is that all nations will be able to have equal trade rights within China. And therefore, if you are, say, like the Japanese, you don't have to worry about the Russians taking over your sphere. Or if you're the British, you don't have to worry about the French taking over your sphere. And if you're a country like the United States that didn't already have a sphere, now you have an opportunity to get into the Chinese market and obviously have more people to buy your products. Now note, who's not a part of this? The Chinese government. This is nearing the end of the Chinese monarchy, and this is, in many respects, the low point of Chinese history in terms of being almost completely dominated by foreigners. Now, in 1901, not too long after being reelected, a few months later, William McKinley will be visiting the Pan American Exposition located in Buffalo, New York. And at this meeting, at this events, he will be shaking hands with people that were visiting. And note, this is still a time where you did not have anything remotely close to the Secret Service protection that we have today for modern presidents. So it was very easy for people to get up close to the President of the United States. One of these guys is going to be a guy named Leon Czolgosz, who was an anarchist and was very opposed to the, pro-business, capitalist, imperialist policies of McKinley. He shows up at the event, points a pistol at McKinley's stomach, fires, and then McKinley dies shortly after. They then bring in a guy that was busy hiking at the time, out in the Adirondacks, Theodore Roosevelt. And when Theodore Roosevelt becomes president, boy, are things going to change. In many respects, Theodore Roosevelt is the first modern president of the United States. Now, we're going to be, seeing how that's going to manifest itself, especially from a domestic perspective as a progressive president later on. But what I first want to start to take a look at is how he is going to have a major hand in defining American foreign policy. And remember, if McKinley was an imperialist, Theodore Roosevelt was an imperialist on steroids. Remember, this was the guy that put American troops near the Philippines, as part of the beginning of the war with Spain. This is a guy that, at the first opportunity, created a volunteer cavalry unit to fight the Spanish called the Rough Riders. This guy loved imperialism, and especially from the perspective of expanding America's power and influence. And that's going to continue to some degree with Roosevelt now in the White House. And one of these areas of focus will be in Panama. Now, if we take a look at Panama, Panama, like many other Central American countries, were the focus of a potential site for building a canal to connect the Atlantic to the Pacific as a way to dramatically reduce transportation time and costs for moving merchant ships and also military personnel. And over the course of the previous 50 years, we were able to kind of negotiate deals with the British and then the French to basically, remove those foreign powers from having any real claim to a Central American canal. But still, though, a canal has yet to be built. But by the time we do get to Roosevelt, Roosevelt is going to be fixated on Panama as a site for the canal. Now, here's the problem. There is no country called Panama at this time. What we now call Panama was controlled by Colombia to the south. And when Roosevelt offers Colombia money to buy Panama in order to build a canal, when he offers Colombia money to buy land in Panama to build a canal, the Colombian government rejects that. Now, note, Theodore Roosevelt, is not a guy that takes no very easily. And to some degree, kind of taking a page from James K. Polk in the 1840s, we're going to see Roosevelt take actions that will instigate a war. Now, note, it's not going to be a war between the U.S. and Colombia, but it is going to be between Panamanian rebels and the Colombian government. We start to just almost magically see, after Theodore Roosevelt's initial offers rejected, we start to see the Panamanians organize in open rebellion. American ships will be off the coast of Panama as peacekeepers. You can obviously understand what that is really what purpose that is really serving. And when the Panamanian rebels do successfully gain independence from Colombia, what do you know? Not too long after, the newly independent Panama will secure a treaty deal with the United States that will grant the United States exclusive canal rights in their country. And note the terms of this. If you take a look at the map right here, you can see what is going to eventually become the Canal Zone. Because not only will the United States own the canal itself, it will own several miles in each direction. As you can see here, about a 10-mile width of territory that the U.S. will outright own surrounding the canal. And no, when I say own, I mean own. I mean, this will be sovereign U.S. territory. So understand that the United States, via Roosevelt, is going to be very successful in using the Panamanian rebellion to secure a very lucrative deal to build the Panama Canal. And, to give you a kind of a sense of Roosevelt's desire to be tough and macho and, almost having like a boyish attitude towards something like this, Roosevelt will actually travel to Panama as president, in his words, to watch the dirt fly. And as you can see here in this picture, to try to, actually do a little bit of construction work in building the canal. It takes about 10 years for the canal to be built. And it's going to involve, obviously, a lake here in the middle of Panama, but also a series of locks that will raise and lower boats to be completed. But note, this in many respects is going to be viewed by Roosevelt himself as perhaps his greatest accomplishment. And note, it's not just a feather in Roosevelt's cap, it is a feather in America's cap. It's not one of the traditional world powers that gets this done. It's America that gets it done. And that's really what Roosevelt's after, is sending repeated messages that America is on the same level as all the other traditional powers. But it's not going to stop there with the Panama Canal. Roosevelt is also going to be fixated on trying to, expand the influence of the Monroe Doctrine, which you may recall dates back to the 1820s, where we will tell the world basically if territory is lost as a colony to a foreign European power, European powers cannot go back and reclaim it. But note, at the time that it was issued, it was really, kind of a, America looking like a paper tiger, really. We didn't really have the ability to enforce it. But now, at the beginning of the 20th century, we certainly have the ability to enforce that. And it's not going to be just the traditional interpretation of it. Roosevelt's going to take it to another level. And what's going to be dubbed the Roosevelt Corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, what Roosevelt is going to be doing is addressing what had become a growing issue in Latin America, which was Latin American countries that were traditionally pretty poor, borrowing money from wealthy European countries and not being able to pay back their debts. Now, there's a concern that if you are a poor Latin American country and you do not pay off your debts to a powerful European nation with a huge military, well, that European country might come in to reclaim its debt by conquering your country. Well, Roosevelt is going to step up and say, no, 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 that will not happen. And how are we going to make sure that doesn't happen? For these Latin American countries that had found themselves indebted to major European powers, he announces that the U.S. will step up and pay those debts to those European powers on the behalf of these poor Latin American countries, which on the surface looks great if you're a Latin American country. Hey, the U.S. is helping us out. The Europeans are happy because they get paid back. The downside, though, is, and this is going to lead to, some questions about the ethics of this, is that the Latin Americans don't really get out of their debt. They just really get it transferred from Europe to an even closer power, the United States. And the United States is going to be able to use that as leverage to exert influence in many parts of Latin America, and that will then breed a certain amount of resentment by many Latin Americans, leading to what many will call the, America as the Colossus of the North, that, big brother that, tries to dominate his younger brothers. We also, of course, when we talk about Roosevelt's impact as a imperialist president, he is known to have, followed the credo of speak softly, but carry a big stick. And basically, now granted, note, he stole that from an African proverb, but anyway, Roosevelt's mindset behind that is that you don't have to actually be at war with countries to exert influence and dominance, which is kind of an interesting thing because we associate Roosevelt before he was president as being pretty warlike. He was on the forefront of advocating war with Spain, and at his first opportunity he joined the military to fight the Spanish. But as president now, he is taking on, more of a tact of, use soft power as much as, if not more than, hard power, meaning war. And when we come back next time, we'll take a look at how Roosevelt's going to be using some of that softer power to expand American influence. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.